Heidi, and she is going to help me teach you how to brush your pet at home. There are several different brushing techniques that can be really useful in different ways of getting some matting out. So she is a show dog who just finished and she is going into retirement. So her mom was nice and let us use her. She does have some mats. The other puppies in the home have been chewing on her some, and so she's got some mats, which kind of works out. So we can demonstrate how to get those out. So if you look at her just from the front here, you might think that she's not really matted. And what we see a lot is people will just kind of come in here and they'll say, okay, she's brushed. I can get my brush through her. I'm using a slicker brush. That's what the groomer told me to use. And she's totally brushed out. Well, what they aren't seeing is underneath here, there is a lot of matting. And all you have to really do is kind of run your hands down here. And if you can't run your hands through her coat like that, and they get stuck or you feel any clumps, then that would be a good indication that there might be some tangles or some mats. There are different levels of matting, and some might be really easy to get out and some might be a little bit more difficult. So we're going to talk about some ways to get some of this really clumpy matting out. It might look worse than it is. It really doesn't take too long to get out. I also have a leash around her neck. The reason for that is because when I'm sitting here on the couch, I can put it under my leg and she can't go anywhere. So it makes it really nice and easy, especially if you have a really fidgety pet. And then I like to put a blanket on my lap too before I start brushing, because I want to protect my couch, and if there's some extra hair here, when I'm done, I can just pick it up and I can put it in the washer and I don't have a problem. So I do like to have just a blanket. It makes the pets feel more comfortable too. So like my dogs prefer when I have a blanket. They kind of know they get to snuggle a little extra that night. So they're like, ooh, I'm going to come up, and they just know. I also usually keep some treats handy, and I will give them some treats while I do it as well. So you want to try and make it a positive experience for them. I also have heard some people will grab a big wooden spoon or a spoon of some sort that they use to cook with, and their kids or whoever will sit next to them with peanut butter on it, and the pet can just lick some peanut butter while they're brushing, and it just makes it a fun time for everybody. So I have a couple different sprays here. And really, this one is Precious Drop by Chris Christensen. It's a keratin spray. It just puts a little bit of slip onto the coat. And this one is a magic detangling spray from iGroom. And it just is a really nice light spray, but it also helps get some of that tangling out. So you're just going to give it a couple little spritzes. You don't want it to be too terribly wet or anything like that. So when I come in here to brush this big tangle here, I'm going to start at the end of the tangle. If you start down here at the base of the tangle, it has nowhere to go, right? So for her, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start. I already sprayed it a little bit. I gave it a spritz. So I'm just going to start right on the end of that mat, right on the top of it, closest to the base of the hair here. And I'm going to put my hand here so she can't, look this way too far. And I'm actually going to grab down at the base of it. So what I'm doing by grabbing down at the base of this mat is she can't really feel it pulling. She might be feeling a little bit of it, but I'm going to basically close off, the feeling to it, so she can't feel it. It's just like our hair. If we get a really big tangle, we're not going to want to get it brushed out just yanking on it. We're going to want to be delicate about it. Typically, when I would brush her, I would actually brush on this side so that way I could get to it. I'm trying to show you on this side. So if you're wondering how to kind of hold them at home, it is easier to brush on the side, where they're like at. But I do want to make sure I can show you what's going on this mat. And I'm just going to keep brushing little bits at a time. It's actually coming out super easy with this slicker brush. it's really easy to get really frustrated with your own pets. It's kind of like your toddlers, right? So if your toddler's not doing what you tell them to do and you're like, would you just go get your pajamas on? And you get really frustrated. It's the same thing with our pets. So just remember, try to keep it fun, try and give them treats, make sure that they are enjoying it. Also, if you are really diligent about doing it every night, you won't have big tangles to get out, and they'll in turn be a little bit easier to deal with because it'll be faster for you and it'll be faster for them, and they'll be excited because it doesn't hurt. It doesn't cause any sort of pain at all. But as you can see, she's not really reacting to anything I'm doing. She just kind of doesn't want to sit still. But she's not crying. She's not panting excessively, anything like that. All of those are signs that it could just be a little bit too stressful, but she's not acting really stressed. She's just kind of being wiggly because she doesn't want to sit still and she wants to go play. So I'm just kind of spreading this out as I go. I'm just making sure that I get a really nice thing on it. You can see I'm only using a couple fingers. I'm not using my whole hand and really pressing down. So that just makes it so that way it's nice and light for her. I'm just kind of pat down and pull, pat down and pull. That's the nicest way to get these tangles out. And I'm just kind of parting the hair as I go and going back towards the base of the hair. And as I keep parting it like that, I can see in the middle where it's still matted. And I'm almost got to the base of the hair here. It's just coming out really nice and easy. Good girl. And again, she's sitting up, she's looking around, she's not crying, she's not trying to get away. This is totally normal. Again, I like to think of all dogs as just a toddler. You know, toddlers are really hard to get to do what you want them to do. They like to do their own thing. So we're just going to keep parting it and just really lightly brush it out. You could always ask your local groomer too to demonstrate this for you, and you could even bring your tools in that you've purchased and that you're using at home to show them and say, is this the best tool? Because there are so many things on the market. It can be really intimidating, and your groomer will be able to help you and be able to really tell you what is the best tool for your dog. And sometimes they might cost a little bit of money, but typically they're going to last the whole life of your dog. So it's not something that you're going to have to buy necessarily again. This brush, for example, is about $60. And I, as a professional groomer, have had this brush for about 6 or 7 years on this one. And honestly, even using it professionally, I haven't had to replace it. So there is definitely something to be said about you get what you're paid for. And if you're getting nice tools, you're going to be able to maintain a nice coat. If you get a slicker brush that's $20 and the pins are all falling out and they're all bent, they're not going to really be easy to get that coat. It also might damage the coat even more as you try to brush it out. So if it's damaging it more, then you're just going to have to kind of keep redoing it, keep dematting this same spot over and over again. So I've got the whole top part of this mat out. And there's a tiny, tiny little tangle there at the top. So what do I do with that? Well, it's teeny tiny. My slicker brush here wasn't pulling that out. So I can grab my comb and I can just, kind of put my hand at the base of it again and just really lightly pull that one little spot out. Because it wasn't coming out with my slicker brush, so that's where my comb comes into play to make sure I get those tiny little pin mats. That's what we call them, or just pin mats. Those little tiny mats we can get out with our comb. And those don't really hurt as long as you're just kind of holding the base of that hair, so that way you kind of are relieving any pressure from her. All right, so I'm just gonna give her another little spritz, and then there's some up top here that I can feel. It's kind of hard to see, but I can feel a little tangle right here, so I'm gonna get that spot. There's a term that you may hear if you talk to any groomer, and they talk about brushing versus shaving mats. So when mats get to this point, there is something called mat memory that we talk about pretty frequently. And basically what we mean when we say mat memory is there is damage that occurs when the hair is already tangled. So if it's a small tangle, even down here, and we're brushing that hair that we just brushed gets minimally damaged every time we brush it. So up here, where it's kind of more tangled than just an actual tangle, it's going to have damaged coat that comes with it. After you brush out a mat like this, it is critical to shampoo it and condition it. The conditioner helps repair some of that brokenness, and it helps repair that hair shaft. If you don't use conditioner on it, it's just going to go right back to being matted, and it may go back to being matted anyway, depending on how damaged that hair is. So sometimes as groomers, we see pets come in with mats kind of in the same spot every time. And because it's in one little localized spot, we may be able to brush it out fairly easily. Usually when it's the whole dog's body, it's much harder, much more difficult for us to brush out the entire dog, usually because it's uncomfortable for the dog, and it takes a long time. They're not used to sitting that long, and it's not a good situation for them. So if it's a little section or a little spot, usually we can brush that out. However, if we continue to brush it out every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks when you bring the dog to us, it's going to just keep getting matted every time. And it's not necessarily because of anything that anyone did wrong, whether it be at home or the groomer. It's because that hair is just damaged in that area. So if it's a little area, you could potentially keep brushing it out until the point where maybe that'll grow long enough you could cut that broken part off and still have a long fluffy cut. Or maybe sometimes it's just better to shave that coat out and get a fresh start. Especially with this breed, they grow really quickly. So if you do go ahead and shave them, typically you're not going to see a dog with this long of coat come into a grooming salon very frequently. A lot of people can't really maintain this amount of coat because it does take brushing them on a daily basis, usually 2 times a day with this amount of coat on these dogs. And it's not just brushing, it's making sure that you're using spray properly. It's making sure that we're using the proper tools so that way all of this hair does not get broken. You'll see her beard up here is in rubber bands. Why is it in rubber bands? It's to keep this out of her mouth because this hair is so long. If it goes in her mouth, 1, it can wrap around the teeth, which can cause damage to the teeth. And 2, if she puts this in her mouth, she'll then kind of eat it and then it breaks the hair. So there are a lot of things at play when we're talking about preserving the texture and the health of the coat, especially when you get a coat this long. So in general, when you have some tangles here and there, it's pretty easy to just kind of start at the top of the mat and work your way down to the base, just like we just did. It'd be really nice and easy to get that out, really super smooth and slick. If it's all over the dog, though, that's when you're going to need to get help from a professional groomer to determine, okay, can we brush this out? If we brush it out, are we going to have a lot of problems in the future with it just matting right back up? Because the last thing you want to do is put your dog through the uncomfortable brushing if it's just going to mat right back up and you're just going to have to do it over again. So it's a decision that you should probably make with the help of a groomer to determine what's best for your pet. And then if you do have to shave them, the good news is hair always grows back. So it'll come right back. It'll look beautiful. and you can have a fresh start and then work on brushing every night at home. So after you brush with your slicker brush, you're going to just make sure you go through with a comb, and you want to really comb and make sure it's not getting stuck anywhere. If it does, you can just kind of lightly pick those out because we've already gone through with the slicker brush. And you'll take this on the entirety of the dog and make sure you can get the comb all the way down to the skin. You want to make sure it's not getting stuck anywhere. You want to make sure it's going all the way down the skin, and you can get that through the coat nice and easy.